All right, we are live. I'm Lars. I'm very happy to see you all joining us here on what we call the Educate for Life bookshelf. And as you can imagine and probably see for yourself right now, it's a pretty virtual bookshelf. And at the same time, it's meant to be highly interactive. But the interactive part is really in the good hands of you and everybody watching this live. So for these next 30 minutes, just about, that we have together here. I invite you to interact with me and my guest today, who will be joining us in just a moment. So, throughout the session, you can write your comments and questions in the chat where you're watching from right now, whether that's on YouTube Live or Facebook Live or LinkedIn Live. You can write in the chat, and I can later bring your questions up on the screen and into our conversation. So, that was just very briefly the housekeeping part. Then let me just take another few seconds to probably welcome you to the Educate for Life community. And we are what's technically called a virtual community of practice, something I learned not that long ago. and we like to present ourselves as your virtual intelligence community for smart learning and development in the age of AI, which is now. What we like to do is actually build the future that we ourselves want to live in. And we like actually to improve what our guest today calls our future fitness. And we'll get back to that in a moment. And we are, as a community, open to everybody who can get yourself online. And if you would like to take part in creating your own future rather than just wait for others to do it for you, then we might be a good tribe for you to hang out with. You're welcome. This live bookshelf event today is where we pick and choose books, specific books to discuss. It's books that we strongly believe represent really important insights, and it can also be actionable frameworks and hacks that we can use in our work when we design our desirable futures for ourselves, but for all 8 billion of us. And today we, in my opinion, and I'm sure you will agree, that we picked a really interesting book for today. And you can find a link to the book in the description section where you're watching right now. So you can go and get a copy for yourself, for your Kindle, or on paper, whatever you prefer. So let me just take another few seconds before we get our guest in to mention what to me is the key sentence that I would like to explore today with one of the two authors of the book From Malthus to Mars, which you see right next to me here. Uh, and the key words are future fitness. And the definition in the book here says that future fitness is the ability to skillfully and efficiently navigate future trends and take action towards how you want to live, lead, and learn. I don't remember if I added then in your most desirable future. Maybe that was this official statement. We'll hear from the author from his mouth in just a moment. So this is overall the theme of the book today, From Malthus to Mars: How to Live, Lead, and Learn in an Exponential World. And I am very excited to actually have with me today one of the two authors of the book, Nicolai Chen Nielsen, and who wrote the book together with Lars Lin. So let's bring Nicolai in. Welcome, Nicolai. I'm very excited to have you here.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
So in just a line or two, and this is probably the hardest question maybe today. So who's Nikolai, uh, and and uh, and why do you do what you do? Over to you.
Yeah. Definitely one of the harder questions that I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
But what I know so far is I'm a consultant, I'm an educator, I'm an author. I've written 3 books now. And why I do what I do is very much around not being satisfied with the status quo, very ambitious. And I
Mm,
also feel like there's so much untapped potential for individuals, for organizations, for societies to live and to do better.
Makes a lot of sense. So, so what got you started in this mindset and this purpose? Was this a triggering point where you realized this is the direction for me?
Yeah, it's interesting. I never set out to write books, and I think in high school, university, it was never actually something I really thought about. But what I found was that I really enjoy problem solving and essentially cracking hard problems, coming up with new and interesting and insightful perspectives. So the books were all a result of having a question or a couple of questions that I felt weren't answered well enough
Hmm.
with existing literature. And then the book was more the end product of lots of years of research and practice and doing an experimentation to essentially try to come up, they say, write the book you wish you could have read.
Yeah,
This was, writing the books that I wish I could read at the moment or I could find somewhere, but I couldn't.
exactly. So, but here it is now,
Yeah.
the book that we you couldn't
Yeah,
find, and but today
exactly.
we found it, and today we're here to discuss it. And again, I hope
Yeah,
everybody who's watching will send questions and comments in the chat while we're talking, and then I will not be the one maybe asking all the questions, but I sure have a lot of questions for you, Nikolai. So let's dive in.
sounds good.
so
Yeah,
why? So let me have a stab at just quickly summarizing the first part of the book, just to kind of try to frame that. And I want to
yeah,
stand corrected in case there's something that needs to be corrected. But really, you're starting the book 300,000 years ago, and 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 kind of summarizing 99.8% of human history, where very little innovation and change happened. Right, very long period of time, very little seemed to happen, or whatever happened pretty slowly. And you refer to this period as the Malthusian economy, named after the
yeah,
priest Malthus, who was, well, like most experts, pretty much all experts, he got away with, or maybe he didn't get away with a prediction for the future. It's very hard to predict about the future. And Malthus, I don't know if he learned it himself in his time, but we certainly are trying to learn from it. His prediction of of the global population growth, which would go exponentially, but the food production would only be linear in growth. That leaves us with this food starvation rate, right? The growing starvation in the world, which turned out to be very incorrect. And
yeah,
and this period lasted probably to around the time where the printing press started to take off in Western Europe, and then the industrial revolutions one after another follows, and we get propelled now into this era of great divergence. um,
yeah,
and then you explain how we escape this Malthusian trap, where we see things the way they used to be, and not maybe looking at the real trends, what's really happening. But and yet, we are on this exponential growth when it comes to our living standards and our economy, and bringing more and more of the population with us into better prosperity, right? And we are on a pretty good growth curve overall. And
yeah,
and yet we seem to still be stuck in this Malthusian worldview. We're still stuck somehow. Even we have documented the growth. We have data on everything we can imagine, and very intelligent, well-educated people trying to make predictions and forecasts, and yet we are often wrong, and yet we still find ourselves in an old worldview. So how can this be, Nikolai? I would like your take on this, and what is it you see in your work that keeps us stuck in the times of Malthus?
yeah. It's a big question. I mean, I think there are many reasons. It's not a simple answer. There's a biological reason that we are as humans set up for survival, right? Our brain looks for threats, and we overplay threats typically three or more times more than we see opportunities. That's just the way we are, and it's served many purposes. But we've also now, for the majority of us, come to a place where we're no longer meeting our basic needs, right? We have everything covered, but we're still predispositioned to live in that way. I think another important thing is that when you look at the Malthusian trap and exponential curves, I would argue that, yes, technology has been going on for 50, 60, 70 years, or it's been going on for longer than that, digital technology for the last, 50, 60 plus years. But I would argue it's really only in the last couple of decades, perhaps 20 or so years.
Hmm.
I mean, Facebook, I saw somewhere recently, was launched in 2003. So that was the new hot thing back then, and they had a couple of million users in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So it's really only for me in the last 20 years that technology has truly gone exponential, that enough of them have started to converge, because it used to be very separate, right? But now you have everything actually happening at the same time. So there's an element for me of this inflection point that now we can truly break free of what has been. I mean, the point of exponential, of course, is that it keeps getting faster and faster and faster. But the last 20 years have been sizably different from the last, 100.
Yeah.
So that's one element, and then it takes time to change mindsets. I do a lot of work with leaders and leadership development, and good intentions are not enough. There's so much around us, the culture, the ecosystem that has an influence.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. This is really interesting. I want to come back to this point that, and we have multiple generations living at the same time, probably with different
Yeah,
perspectives on this. I want to get back to this later as well. This is one of your many
yeah,
specialties, and where we can really dive some interesting things, or into some interesting
yeah,
things. I just want, in terms of the book itself, what happens
yeah,
next in the book is an overview of vectors to the future, trends, what's actually happening. And your point is we
yeah,
need to kind of update ourselves and orientate ourselves to what is actually
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
And there are many things that we as a community certainly can learn, and also when it comes to monitoring and understanding trends. However, I do take a
yeah,
bit pride in our own way of working. When we get started on a new project, on a new initiative, we do an awakening
yeah.
first to like reset
Okay.
ourselves and kind of try to suppress our limiting beliefs and old beliefs, and
Yeah,
to really see
yeah,
what is the reality actually, not what we think it is, but what it really is, right?
yeah,
That's kind of our way of getting up to speed. So your book comes with this amazing chapter actually of the vectors to the future. I highly recommend everybody to go through the chapter. um, but and one thing is like, okay, read it in the book, but how do anybody out there actually orientate themselves to this change? And I guess it needs to happen on an ongoing basis, again and again and again, as change is happening. So yes, read the book,
yeah,
but how could we make a habit out of doing this?
yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's a side thought is that a book, in the book publishing industry is ripe for disruption. It's still old fashioned for it to be published. So, the book is already outdated in some fronts, to your point around this continuous monitoring, right? The book
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
was largely written 9 months ago at least. But for me, it's very much it's a mindset, and it's also very much around experimentation, because I think this, again, my work with hundreds, thousands of leaders, everyone knows about blockchain, right? Leadership development program 5 years ago. Who's heard of it? Etc. Cryptocurrency, VR, AR, robotics. How many of you can explain it to someone? Okay, less people can, right? How many have actually, your business leaders, you're all leading big companies, how many of you have actually experimented with buying something in crypto, or more recently asking questions of who's actually been to the metaverse, right? Just to see what it is. And it's such a small proportion. So to answer your question, I think there's a knowledge piece, but there's even more important, just do it. I mean, we so many of these things are accessible either free or for a couple $100, and just see what it is, and get your hands dirty. That's what kids do.
Yes, exactly. They understand how
Yeah.
it's done. Just play with it and
Yes.
see how it
Yeah.
works. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
amazing.
Exactly.
I just want to add one little thing to I think it's great advice. the little thing is I see every day. I'm sure you do as well. Long list on social media of totally free AI tools and all sorts of awesome
Yeah.
technologies. It's totally free, right? Go and play with
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
nothing that
Yeah.
should stop you. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing. Nicola, in terms of, so there's probably more. So this is the play part. I'm a big believer in that
Yeah.
part. But if we wanted to just learn from others who have already been researching on this, I know that you're part of Super Trends. Do you want to take a
Yeah.
moment to talk about what is Super Trends really doing?
Yeah. Yeah, Super Trends is a platform and it's trying to help people, you could say, speak the future or be more literate in the future. The way I see it is it's like a financial metric. I mean, data is important, and now we all know how to read financial metrics if we're in the business world. And now you have human-centered metrics like engagement and so forth, culture and so forth. But future as a subject is often not well actually analyzed or understood as one-time effort. So to your question, Supertrends is a platform, and it crowdsources real-time trend data indicators across different aspects, different industries, from experts, from online sources, and social media and so forth, to give companies and individuals a pulse on whatever indicators are important for them. So this could be the cost of oil, it could be the price of creating a battery in a certain size, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So this is kind of a help to anybody who's trying to understand what are those trends in a nutshell right
Yeah,
now in my particular game. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. I see it as something that could be on an executive dashboard. So in addition to the the indicators which are more result based, what are some of the input indicators? And critically, it's about making decisions. So when is a trend reaching a inflection point that now we need to take notice because something is happening that's interesting?
Right. Right. Cool. So
Yeah,
these are a couple of ways that we can kind of improve the way we gather data, right? And our own efficiency on how
yeah,
to gather data. This is one of the key components to being future fit, according to the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I wanted to kind of bring this up, and now we have a couple of ways. Play, just get started, and there are
yeah,
platforms, and there are many options out there where we can at least seek inspiration, probably make up our own
yeah,
mind about where things are going, and for our own use case, etc., how mature, relevant
yeah,
it might be. But there's plenty of sources
exactly.
together. There's nothing that should stop us. So cool. Let's move on to, or come back rather, to the mindset part, the mental abilities
Yeah,
part. It's something that I'm personally very interested in, and many in our
yeah,
community are actually putting a lot of work and effort into how do we empower each other to grow the mindset, the mental ability, cognitive abilities that seems to be right for us wherever we live, whatever we are trying to do. And and it's not just that we are sitting still somewhere and the world is standing still, and we can concentrate on the mindset. But I wanted to quote you, or maybe paraphrase your book a bit. Um, so I'm just reading out quickly here. We are jointly racing into a future that will be vastly different at a blistering speed, like a Formula One car blasting into heavy fog. That's kind of, it's
yeah,
it's it's probably a very good description of how many of us feel and experience the changes that are happening in the world. And it's a lot to
yeah,
digest as a as a
yeah,
biological creature.
yeah,
So so I guess we have to drive into this heavy fog with our eyes wide open, right, and understand these
yeah,
trends before we really can figure out how to respond to them as individuals, but
yeah,
also as teams and as organizations. So the next thing, the next key component in the future fit, in being future fit, is to have an appropriate reference model for interpreting the meaning of what we are seeing here. And that's a very important, I think, thing to touch on today. And your book offers us 8 future fit mindsets. This could be
Yeah.
options. This could play a part in this. And
Yeah.
you offer a lot of life hacks and other advice that can be applied.
Yeah.
So, so let me move into my next question in this area about the reference models. And we probably will not need the same reference models, all of us. We're not going to have the same ones anyway, but we probably should have some different ones from we have today. And and I'm close to being, I'm not a boomer, but I'm technically close, right? I'm not a boomer,
Yeah.
but I'm close. Uh, and then we have the Zoomers, and you're describing the
Yeah.
different generations at a fairly detailed level in the book, which I think is important. We have these different
Yeah.
generations, we have different perspectives, different mindsets, different reference models. So,
Yeah.
who's kind of putting some reference models on the table, and for example in the education system, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of being regulated what we are being taught, and what, even what we are supposed to think sometimes. So
Yeah.
are we as a society, with boomers mostly being the decision makers, uh, are we actually able as a society to help ourselves as a humanity to select proper, appropriate reference models? What's your take as a human being?
Well, I mean, lots of thoughts. Education is one of the industries that has changed relatively little. That's a very diplomatic way of saying it. In the last 50 years, compared to other industries that are being disruptive, right? And a lot of it's still government or partly government operated and funded. So to answer your question, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. If you look at the way people actually get equipped to do well in life and on the job, so not just professionally but also personally, people are learning things outside of school. I mean, you don't really learn enough as a middle school, high school, about emotional intelligence, about some of these softer things, if you will. It's still very STEM based. STEM is important, but it's you need more on top. So I think new reference models are needed. Skills are becoming obsolete, literally within, depending on the type of skill, but within a couple of years for many of them. So it's a very, I think they're timeless topics that are not being taught, which is much more around learning agility, and which is I think human, I mean empathy, like truly understanding how human beings work, creativity, how to be innovative. I do think a lot needs to actually change, and learning, Educate for Life is a wonderful name. Learning has to be seen as not a one-time thing or an event, but school is just the thing to get you excited and to ignite a passion, but learning has to be seen as a lifelong journey, and it's still often not. That's a problem.
It's definitely the problem. I think it's, one of the maybe small contributions that we can make is to offer what you're bringing into the conversation
Yeah,
here with your book, and and viewpoints and thoughts and advice and all that. So that's what we're here
yeah,
for, to kind of
yeah,
help find these ways forward in terms of finding relevant reference models or grow some new ones. Yeah,
yeah, and yeah.
go on.
I mean, one thought is you talked about mindsets, and of course, there's some specific ones that we outlined. But I think an overarching meta framework that I think is very important is when you have a mindset, there's a piece of it which is a structural awareness. So you actually understand, what you don't know, what you're good at, what you're not at, and then there's an embodied awareness, meaning when am I actually demonstrating the mindset or not, and can I catch myself in the moment? Can I course correct in the moment? I'm about to do X, let me take a step back. And I think that meta awareness is also not taught enough, because you can't teach people everything, but if you can teach people how to think and how to think about how they think in the moment, that's where the power comes in, because then you're constantly reflecting on what do I know, what do I not know, and how can I improve along the way.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of it. Definitely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have a couple more questions on the long list,
Yeah,
Nikolai, and, and time is flying. But I want to get into straight into the next one. It's in the
yeah,
same ballpark as the other question. But so what we are doing at Educate for Life here, we are trying to level the playing field in society, right? To give everybody as much equal access as possible and equal influence and these things in the
yeah,
ideal outcome. And we do this worldwide. We try to do this across social and cultural divides, and really, what I would love to see is that everybody, if they choose to, they can study and practice their future fit mindset. Uh, so they
yeah,
now have the book to get started. but but what I want to get to is it's hard sometimes to do it uninterrupted from those who are stuck in that Malthusian trap. There will be others with other
yeah,
reference frames saying, "Get just stop what you're doing there. That's not what you're supposed to be doing." So what's the best thing
yeah,
we anybody who wants to level the playing field here and give everybody this opportunity, what's the best thing we can prioritize to do at a global level?
yeah. A couple of thoughts, probably two thoughts. I mean, one is that learning everything is today is becoming, let's say, segmented. All product and services are becoming into micro products, microservices, micro objects, and becoming personalized. I mean, we talk about in the book, you can order personalized cereal, clothes, food, whatever it might be. It's
Yeah.
really based on your Spotify playlist. So education is the same, and leading learning platforms are highly personalized. So I think that's a no-brainer, and it's all about the data and capturing feedback and then tailoring the interventions based on where people are. So very simply, it could be you give people the future fit test, right?
Yeah.
They do some self-assessments, or maybe they collect external feedback, and it gives them a bit of a starting point of what would be the most helpful for them. The second thought is that when you think about how people truly develop, and if you think about the ones stuck in the Malthusian mindset, often to go from unaware of what you don't know to being aware that, shit, I need to maybe think about things differently, or um, it needs to be an awareness, and this
Yeah.
awareness can be triggered typically by an external event. And sometimes it can be that something bad happens in your life, right? We see
Yeah.
that, and it's a bit of a wake up call, but it can also be through inspiration. And that's, of course, the more favored intervention where you get people in, and you, through inspiring and actually through a little bit of getting them uncomfortable, they realize that they might need to rethink their frameworks of the world. So there's a little bit of shock therapy in a nice way.
Yeah. It's probably needed, right? That shock therapy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right. So let me just briefly get into the last part of your book as well, because it's really
Okay.
interesting and really important, the organizational level. Now we are shifting away
Yeah,
from the individual, but to the organizational level, where it's just as critical to be future fit. And
yeah,
and or maybe you're paraphrasing Buckminster Fuller when you say that managing organizational transformations focus mentally on creating the new rather than fixing the old. Right? We should create the new, forget about the old. And
yeah,
I agree to that totally. By the way. And then one of the components to be future fit as an organization is to get into hyper-social business models, which should describe
yeah,
also in the book. This involves platform and ecosystem economics and disintermediation, and this is going to play a big role in the future of education, where we're doing a lot of work, but also the future of
yeah,
work, how organizations operate, right? This is going to be key
yeah,
and probably very different from how most operate. They're not
yeah,
hyper social. So, so what's your take on how organizations can best apply this hyper social business behavior? What's the crash course that you go out
yeah.
and deliver, if there is one?
Yeah, it is. it is quite radically different. We talk a lot about that the organization needs to match the demand, right? Supply needs to match demand, not in terms of the numbers, but in terms of the how you get there. So many organizations today are quite fixed. We have a fixed boundary. Employees are full-time employed, and we do a little bit of partnerships and so forth, but it's quite fixed and it's quite inflexible, and that's a problem. So hypersociality is really about opening, I mean, exploding that to look radically outside of the company, to be part of many different organizations. But equally important, it's about actually having a model of working which is much more fluid based on when projects and things come up. So we're not trying to advocate one model, because that often doesn't, one size doesn't fit all, but it's more the principle of having an organization that leverages not one or two different types of employees, but literally 10, right? University boards, research labs, communities like Educate for.Life, all these things can be tapped into and actually curated. So the skill as a manager leader becomes much more around orchestration and facilitating the right dialogues versus saying I have X employees and I'm now going to execute in one direction. It's a very different mindset for a leader.
Yeah, yeah. And so one component that you mentioned is community building, and it's
Yeah.
obviously what we do, but I guess everybody should do it. And and what's the number one priority if you're to pick? This is my last question for now.
Okay.
If you're to pick just one priority to get a
Yeah.
community creation going, how do you best get
Yeah.
started?
We go through 10 shifts in the book, so it's hard, I want to talk about many things, but if I
Yeah,
had to pick one, and the one I often talk about with companies as well, to be honest, when you think about the future, it is setting direction and not destination. So I think for a community, it's a balance, but there needs to be enough guidance that people are rallying around a specific direction without it being too specific, right? And it needs to be bold. I think that's where people get energized when there's something which is we are reinventing education and we have a specific thing out there. The direction is super clear, but then you let the path to get there being quite flexible. Companies are often too specific, right? We've budgeted 5 years and we have a plan, and this is our goal instead of this is our direction.
yeah, yeah. Again, we're back to mindset, ways of looking at the future versus the past,
Yeah,
and and a
yeah,
purposeful way forward. Yeah, awesome. Nikolai, the allotted time for this little chat we had today is up. Time flies.
yeah.
That's been half an hour already. So I just want to really thank you and Lars Tvede for putting this book together. I think it's going to be a really important piece of reference on our virtual and physical bookshelf, and I hope for many others as well. Go grab a copy of the book. The link is in the notes, and we're happy to share the link everywhere. So Nikolai,
I appreciate that.
how do people get in touch with you? What's your preferred way if they want to kind of get
Couple
closer?
of ways.
Hmm?
So I mean, first of all, great to be on this discussion.
I'll
Really
put it
really
on.
good to
Yeah.
be here. Yeah, Nicolai Chen Nielsen. I think I'm probably one of the only ones called that. So on Instagram or LinkedIn, pretty easy to find me. I publish stuff quite regularly, and on my website, nicolaicn.com. So definitely reach out. Would love to stay in touch.
Awesome. I'll make sure to spell that out and put in our notes as well, so it's easy and with
Perfect.
links. Obviously, we have links.
Yeah.
Wow. So,
Yes.
Nikolai, thank you so much for being part of this discussion, and I think there are some important lessons for everybody here to pick up and go and play with. So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we are out, and we'll continue
Thank you, Lars.
in our backstage in just a moment. So thank you for now, Nikolai. See you in a moment.
You too. Thank you.